Whistler series, really, if you had to point to a series that came out of Hollywood during the 1940s and said, you know, this series is kind of noirish or is film noir, I think The Whistler really is that series, and the films have definitely a lasting appeal. For those of you not familiar with The Whistler, very briefly, The Whistler was a radio program, very similar to the well-known suspense program, but slightly kind of a little lower echelon in that there were original stories written every week, and it was typically someone, John Q. Public or John Q. Noir as it is, caught in a web of circumstances, fate, obsession. I mean, the theme of our festival this year is lust and larceny, and you'll see those themes repeated throughout the Whistler movies. And
it was a big stretch for a noir festival.
That's right. So from radio, it made the transition into screen, and there were 8 of these movies made. And Richard Dix starred in 7 of them, and Richard Dix was a very, very fine actor who started in the silent era in the 20s. He was one of the actors that made a very effective transition from silence to talkies. I mean, he was in the 10 Commandments, 1923. Most notably, Cimarron was nominated for Best Picture in 1931. Richard Dix was nominated for Best Actor Oscar. He had a very long career at RKO, and he ended up, the first time he came into my consciousness was watching him in the Val Lewton film Ghost Ship, playing the captain from hell, total maniacal. And he really added heft to these Whistler films. He was very versatile. He had really a great presence on screen and added a lot, and he could be the bad guy, the good guy, or the one that was totally, totally confused. And we are honored tonight to have the son of Richard Dix, Robert Dix, here as our special guest. And thank you. Did your dad, when you were a boy, did he stop you from seeing him in movies like that, playing parts like that, Ghost Ship and this particular film, or did he keep you pretty much shielded from the show business and keep that separate when you were a boy?
Well, there were certain movies that I was told not to see. One was Frankenstein and the Wolfman. And of course I saw it, and as a kid I didn't sleep for 6 weeks. But no, he didn't give instructions like that. I'm reminded of my mother who would never watch him kiss a lady on the screen. You know, the scene would be playing along, he'd go to kiss my mother, turn away. She would...
Jealous.
And my dad would say, Virginia, it's just a movie. But he really was most grateful to people that loved his work. And as you can see, he was quite a diverse actor. You know, he played, even way back in the silent days, he did some comedies. If you've seen them, his timing was great. He was a funny guy. But remembered, of course, for Cimarron, the Academy Award winner, and he said to me, he said, son, he said, I rode the crest of Cimarron for 15 years.
It rode that wave.
Yes. But I think the interesting thing about Hollywood and its history is that today our so-called stars, they didn't have a term superstar in the day, they didn't have the mystique they did back in the old Hollywood. Our personal life was kept very, very separate from the professional life. And he was very careful not to mix the two.
Right.
So Lou Landers, the director of this Whistler, and Bill Castle,
right,
and a few other, John Wayne, Randolph Scott, those are a few of the Hollywood friends that would come to our home and visit. But most of his friends and associates were kept away from the home and at the studio. There's a lot of history behind Hollywood of old the way they painted with light, I think, is something that's now being appreciated by younger generations.
Right.
You know, are looking back and saying, you know, these people were all pioneers.
John Alton.
Yeah, every department.
Right.
As you see, not just the guys in front of the camera, but everyone behind the camera too.
You mentioned your father keeping that firewall and guests coming, you know, some showbiz guests and keeping that separate. Now you had really growing up 2 homes. Tell us a little bit about that. You know.
Yes. Well, the home that he loved as a hideaway was called the Haven, and in 1926 he and his chauffeur Emil hiked up to the top of the Malibu Mountains above Topanga Canyon, and Dad bought 165 acres up there. In the top 20 he developed in a beautiful Spanish-American home, and we had barns and a little dairy business that supplied the people in the canyon with dairy product. But that was before he met Miss Webster, my mother, and for her he built a home on Calavista Drive in Beverly Hills. It was a 16-room shack.
Wiki up.
Yeah, right. But believe me, compared to what it is today, it was added on to, and then some more. It was initially 2.5 acres in the hills of Beverly, and just bought by Tom Cruise for $35 million. So prices have gone up there a little bit.
Yeah, I hate to ask what 165 acres cost in Malibu in 1926 and now.
It was a different world. You know, I wrote in my book, those of you that have gotten it will see that one of the things I mentioned is back in those early days, the postage stamp was 3 cents, you know. So just using that as a yardstick, we're in a whole different world today.
I think a lot of us do tend to forget how big a star your dad was. I mean, certainly he was still in the public eye making the Whistler pictures at Columbia, but back in the late 20s and the early 30s, he was just a huge box office success, a huge star. What was that like for you as 8, 10 years old when you would go places with your father and all of that? How did he deal with all of that attention and with his fans and all of that business?
I think the best way to answer that is to say, first of all, in Beverly Hills in those days, the sons and daughters we all went to each other's birthday parties. We knew each other as kids. Joan Crawford's children, Wild Bill Wellman, his daughter Patty Wellman, and all of us grew up together. So it was kind of family within the community, extended family. Only a few times did I realize that I was any different than any other kid that was going to Hawthorne Grammar School or part of that community. I went with my dad, and he loved chocolate sodas, and we went into a little soda fountain there. In those days, if you remember, the guys had the little white outfits on, and they'd actually make you a soda from behind the counter. And there was a mirror behind him, and a lady came in, and we are the only 2 customers besides this lady that came into the soda fountain. And she saw the reflection of my father in the mirror behind the soda fountain, and she pointed at the reflection and screamed at the top of her lungs. She didn't point at him, who was sitting right down there. Gave me the impression of the power of the image of Hollywood.